Hello Thrive Nation, I'm with Nicci Robertson and she's a clinical nutritionist. She's written an incredible book called Thrive and I've loved it. I've got some favorite recipes, especially the berry ice cream. I love ice cream, but they're incredible recipes. And yeah, we started working together with sort of clients and patients, and she's really an expert in NLP,
Yes.
neuro-linguistic programming, which I think is so important when it comes to nutrition. And also functional medicine, does a lot of functional medicine. So welcome to my show. I've been on your show and it was really, really, really cool and just a privilege to have you.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's so good to be here finally.
Cool. Now let's give just the audience and the viewers on YouTube a bit of your backstory. You went through a very interesting relationship with food. Maybe we call food a person and sort of give them a name. Maybe Fred, if it's, I don't know, Fred, or your relationship with food was very interesting. And I love in the book how you just start with that, because you're a real person and you authentic and you vulnerable, and people need to hear that, and you say that in your book. So give us a little background on your relationship with maybe Fred. Fred is this person called food that we put in our mouths, and just your story,
Sure. So I think it is really important that you're relatable, that you don't come across as just an expert, because there's lots of experts out there, but they don't always make a big difference. So if you've been through these hard knocks, people can relate to you more, and I think that's really, really important. And what I've been through my life, and I think a lot of practitioners can say the same, is it's a gift. No matter what you've been through, it's a gift. If you look at it from where you are now as a result of what you've experienced. Otherwise, life would be really flat and boring and grey if we don't have these incredible experiences. And even at the time, they might seem horrible and like a mountain you'll never get over. You will get over everything if you really want to badly enough. So my backstory is I was born into a family that were obsessed with food. That's Russians and French. It was Russian from my dad's side. They were Lithuanian Russian Jews who were shipped to Africa between World War I and World War II to avoid being signed up in the Russian army. And they arrived in Benoni from landing in Cape Town, and all they knew how to do was bake. So they went into the food industry, and my grandmother had 6 children, and she just knew how to nurture with food. They couldn't even speak English. And they became very successful, ended up with a big deli, and that's how my dad learned to, that's his love language, is feeding people. So no matter what, we were fed, and even if no matter what, we were always given food. And if you weren't hungry, something was wrong with you. But if you were overweight, you were also like, why are you eating so much? What's wrong with you? You shouldn't be eating. But here, have this nice Chelsea bun I've just baked, and think about it. Okay. So the contradictions were rife. And on my mom's side, she came from a family who were Parisian, and they imported food into Africa, everything from foie gras to champagne and caviar. But she had, being a ballet dancer, she had a dysmorphic relationship with her body, and she starved herself and then binged, which was very common, still is very common, funnily enough. But I grew up with this dichotomy, this push-pull. You've got to look a certain way, be a certain way in the world, but you've also got to eat. Yeah. So I was sent off to weigh less at age of 10. Wow. Yeah, I was not an overweight child. When I look back at pictures, I was kind of normal. Kids go through phases of putting on body fat and losing body fat.
Yeah, hormones and changes and pre-hormones and all those things.
And it's very much related to trauma, and it's related to the amount of activity you do. So when I see parents come to me with their kids and they're really worried about this child who's not overweight, they're just inactive, it's a really easy fix. Yeah. So I work with a lot of parents and a lot of children, knowing what it felt like as a kid to be in that position. I eventually did put on a lot of weight, because I used to eat my emotions like many people do. I would go up to 80 kilos, and I could also go down to 42 kilos really quickly. I knew how to manipulate the system, but over time my thyroid took the hit, as it does. And I had burnout, and I ended up with fibromyalgia, so full body pain, nothing helped. And I was up against the wall, and I went to every doctor. I went to multitude of dietitians who really did still buy into the all-bran and flora margarine paradigm, which a lot of them still do.
Yeah, and that's true.
Like Frankenfoods.
But I'm going to stop you there now, because you had a role model of a mother who sort of just was binging and then losing weight, and people don't realize that, when you've got kids, they're watching you from 3 years old. I mean, they're just sponges. NLP, I had Bruce Lipton on the show. Until the age of 7, there's no filters. I mean, these conscious programs are just running. They're running and running. And so what you're doing, you're modeling, and they're watching, and they're seeing, and they're absorbing your relationship with food.
Yeah.
And they start developing those similar relationships.
They do. And I picked up secret eating from my mom. So what I ate in private didn't count. And that was
secret
scary.
Eating. That's an interesting term and understanding. What is secret eating?
So if you do it in private and no one sees, there's no witnesses, it didn't happen.
Oh, really?
And you almost go into a sense of denial. You convince yourself that you're not eating rubbish. Why are these things not working? So it's a form of denial. It's like if I do it in private, like when people are addicted to anything, if they do it in private, then it's okay because the world doesn't know.
It's we're going to get onto CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, but those are the patients that we do CGM. I can't understand what's happening, and they say, oh no, 9 o'clock I had a really stressful event, and meanwhile they ate something, the glucose is spiking, but then they know that if they have stress, it also spikes their glucose. It's just sort of the secret eating that they're trying to hide from their practitioners.
Yes, I use CGM a lot with people.
Okay.
I've got about 25, 30 people on a CGM at the moment. And it is fascinating because it's a mystery what's going on. And what I'm seeing a lot of is that waking glucose is really high. What are you doing the night before? And, nothing. I just had a couple of dates. That's pure sugar. Or I had a chai tea. It's like, that doesn't count, does it?
Exactly.
Like, that is just pure sugar. So, yes, that the food that's not part of a plan, or, we'll only talk about the things that we think are good.
Yeah, or we don't want to expose to the world, and they don't want to be honest with.
Yeah, we've got it, and the CGM really exposes everything because you can't lie to your blood.
Exactly,
it's going to tell you what's going on.
But maybe it can help because I'm trying to get sort of an app. I know the CGM, we use the Freestyle Libre. I don't know if you use
That's what I use.
Now, the app doesn't have a history, it doesn't keep it. So, have you found an app that's.
No, I still use their app, and it's it's a little bit limited.
Yeah, because you can't see a history. Now, I've spoken to the guys at Levels. I don't know if you know Levels, an international company there, but they're not available here.
The cost with a rand is prohibitive for most people. But if Libre had a more efficient app, it would.
Yeah, with just a history, you just want to see what happened when you do it, because these patients or clients do it, and then 3 months later they can't remember what their data looks like, and that's problematic. But we'll get there. Okay, so carry on with Fred. Fred's relationship with Fred.
Right, so Fred.
And then, and just let us know what happened, because I think a lot of these things start early with regards to your thoughts regarding food, your actions, and then your habits, and then your lifestyle. And then once you got lifestyle, and then this brain's forming these patterns, it's so hard.
It is hard. It's hard because you don't know where to turn, and there's so much conflicting info. And our reference manual in the 80s was Cosmopolitan magazine. If you didn't look like Cindy Crawford, something was wrong with you, and you had to follow that diet in the magazine. And these were starvation diets, and it's not sustainable. It doesn't make any kind of common sense. So I saw a couple of endocrinologists. I saw Dr. Barner. Dr. Barner was a turning point for me. He said to me, until you change your mind, your body's not going to change. And I insisted that he give me the diet drug that he wasn't talking about.
Oh, sure.
And he said, it doesn't exist. And he made me quite cross, because I was hoping for a magic bullet, but that feeling of frustration is really what turned me on to not proving him wrong or anyone else wrong, but created a determination that I was going to figure this out one way or another.
And eventually you did with Re Invent Heath, which we'll talk about the program. I think you got some nice steps here.
So
we'll take you through.
Exactly. So what I did was, for a couple of months, I started a spreadsheet, and I went into the kitchen cupboard and I recorded the nutritional info of every food product that would possibly ever pass my lips.
Now, when was this? How old were you?
This was when I was in my sort of late 20s.
Okay.
Because I figured, what we're being taught wasn't working. I wanted to know what's going on in the biochemistry of this food we're eating. And I went through everything in the cupboard, and I was blown away by how much sugar is in food that we think is healthy. And I recorded everything I ate and worked out the macronutrient values, not the calories, but the macronutrient, the sugar content, and the fiber and the protein content of everything. And I figured when I was seeing incredible results, I was eating less than 2 grams of sugar per meal.
Okay.
I was eating a minimum of 20 grams of protein per meal.
Okay.
So that flipped the macronutrient balance
Yes.
of what I've been taught completely around. I was losing about 100, 200 grams of fat a day,
Wow.
just flipping around macros.
Okay.
And that's how Re Invent was born. So
Sure.
I tested it on myself, and then I tested it on other people.
But I mean, what gave you the drive? I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, I mean, the book is called Thrive, and you can pick it up. I picked this up at Exclusive Books. Where can they pick it up? Because we're going to be talking about it.
Everywhere. So
Everywhere.
Woolworths, Amazon, it's everywhere.
Okay,
It's, yeah.
cool. Brilliant. And we'll put those links in the show notes. But this was a profound statement when I went through this, and I've highlighted because my wife says I must use highlighters. And I've actually learned something from her. You know, I did even with patients. But here's a quote. Once I accepted that my health was entirely my responsibility, that there were no shortcuts and no one was else to blame, I knew what I had to do. And so what gave you that drive, or what gave you that revelation with regard to it's entirely my responsibility?
I had a conversation with God.
Really?
Okay. And I can't call myself a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. And I was literally sitting in bed one night in pain. I was back against the wall. I didn't know what to do. I tried everything, every doctor, every diet, every drug. And I literally said, if you help me to help myself, I'll spend the rest of my life helping anyone else who needs help.
What a promise.
Completely. And the next day I had no pain. And that was it. I owned an advertising agency at that stage.
Okay.
And I remember just picking up my Mac, saying, giving it to my partner, going, it's yours. I don't want anything. I have a mission.
Yeah.
And I've made a promise and I have to see this through. But not because I just was completely compelled. I loved to do this. It was like the light turned on.
Okay.
So the drive came from something. I can't really take responsibility for anything I do. There's something else playing out here. There's a
But you had to accept it. You had to embrace it.
And
you had to action it. Otherwise you could have carried on in advertising and said, listen, you know what, I can carry on. You had to actually take it. Yeah.
It's a compelling, when you have reached the bottom and you've reached this level of pain, then it's either sink or swim.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to give up on anything.
Yeah.
So it was.
But who gave you that drive? Because a lot of people give up. They just take pills. They've got chronic pain.
Yeah.
You tell them to do the basics. You tell them to do incremental steps, and they can't do even the smallest. You give them a health coach. They can't carry on with that.
Yeah.
It seems like you had a very strong internal sort of drive.
For sure. I don't know where it comes from because, I mean, I'd say my dad's pretty driven.
Yeah.
But I don't know where this comes from. I wasn't brought up like that. But I've never been able to give up.
So what do you say to the people who don't have that drive?
Come back when you're ready. Come back when it's too painful.
Really?
And I've had that conversation with many people. In fact, clients, I've given their money back and said to them, don't waste my time or your money. You're not ready yet. And you can tell when someone's ready. They are at a point where they're ready to listen and ready to try anything. And very few people are there. A lot of people are still looking for someone to fix them. As you know, as a medical practitioner, it's a partnership.
Yeah, sure.
You can only do so much.
Sure.
The person you're working with has to do the majority of the work. And I think, I've literally had people come to me and pay with a credit card and not come back for another consultation. And say, but I paid, I expected something to happen. It's like, but you did nothing. It's like, no, but I paid for something. Surely something should happen.
Yeah, no, sure.
That's not how it goes.
So then how do we take our children? We both got daughters. Because I asked this question, I mean, the seed to change is often suffering. And I mean, that's the reality for most people. Now, it's difficult there because you want to prevent suffering. And so how do we build these sort of new neural patterns with our children so that they actually don't have to go through the suffering and they can develop these habits? Because at the end of the day, we want to take the next generation, prevent all this chronic disease. Because it's an epidemic. We're losing the war against chronic disease. We know that. We're losing the war against being overweight, seriously unhealthy overweight and seriously unhealthily obese.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I believe there are some people that are carrying, weight, but they're not unhealthy, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
in typical terms, it's difficult to say, let's call their body composition, because overweight is sort of a very vague term, but their body composition is not what it could be to be optimized, but they're still extremely healthy.
Yes. all their markers, their biomarkers
Correct,
are in a good place. So it's not, weight is not, I mean, body fat and glucose levels are a far better indication.
Yes, correct.
So going back to kids, so thankfully our kids have got good role models. What I think are good role models.
Yeah.
So to give you an example, my daughter came back from last term with an A for biology.
Yeah.
And I said, why? How come? She said, it's all I ever listened to.
Wow.
You don't stop talking about heart health and diabetes and nutrition.
Yeah.
It's like, it's rubbed off. It's like, I'm so glad I could do something to like at least infiltrate the way you think about things.
Yeah.
I've also given a lot of thought to, can we prevent our children from suffering? And no, we can't.
Yeah.
We have to let them learn the hard way to an extent.
Yes.
You don't want them really suffering.
Sure.
But they've got to feel some locus of discomfort to ask if there's another way.
Yeah.
The other way is to, this is where NLP is really useful, is to get them to imagine how they want to be in the world. Yeah. And when I see kids and their parents are bringing them in for weight issues, we don't talk weight. We say, how much fun do you want to have? How fast do you want to go? How strong do you want to be? Yeah. And start building up the positives. Not go, well, you're going to get fat and you're going to die of diabetes. Forget that. Yeah. What do you want to see your life doing? How exciting do you want it to be? And this is the vehicle that's going to take you there. The brain and the body. And if you feed it the right fuel, it's going to take you to where you want to be. And I think especially with very young children is to build up this positive motivation, is that they're putting in the stuff that's going to give them the tools to have the best life possible.
But that narrative's not out there. I mean,
we're
talking about just adding value to the world, and that's what brings contentment. That's what brings joy, fulfillment. But people are just chasing happiness. They're chasing these dopamine hits. You know, that's what they want to do, just to feel better, just in this crazy world. And to really change that narrative with regards to food and how they see the world. And
the thing is, you can't have the happy without understanding that there's discomfort. Otherwise you've got no comparison. You've got to know what it feels like to feel unwell and lethargic and have brain fog, to know how much happiness you get from not having that. So I think also in an age of instant gratification is to get that through to our children, that you've got to actually work for this. It's not going to just arrive. And that's where we build resilience, and that's where we build ownership of what we've achieved that no one can take away. You know, so just to give it all to your kids and think, well, I'm going to save you from suffering is a disservice. So yeah, it's complicated. Parenting is hard. It's the last thing you want to do is see your kids suffer.
What about tools and data? I mean, we'll talk about CGM in terms of helping people change and transform, people getting feedback, either from, we call it subjective feedback from people around, you know, that you trust, you know, that want to speak into your life, and then objective data looking at CGM or the bloods or the markers, or, you know, the Oura ring details or the Whoop details that we look at, and the data, how important it is. How have you found that to be with regards to helping people sustain their transformation?
It's critically important. So I think to have objective feedback, it's one thing to be able to sit and converse with somebody you trust and you enjoy the conversation. I mean, we can all listen to podcasts and I listen to hours of podcasts every week. But until you see the data and you start measuring and managing, we see this with the CGM. And we see this with bioimpedance. So when people see their metabolic age, that gives them a bigger shock than their body fat. Like, I'm a 40-year-old coming out at a metabolic age of 58 because they've got so much body fat. That shocks more people than anything else. Blood tests for sure. I mean, there's a shocker of note when you see what's really going on in real time with your blood, and working towards improving that. I mean, CRP sitting in 30s and 40s. That's a really scary place, and people really understand the sort of the gravity of that kind of situation. Oura ring is that's a critical tool to see, because I mean, when we talk health and we talk nutrition and weight loss, without sleep nothing's going to work. And unless you understand that you've got to respect and plug into your circadian rhythm, and you don't even know what that is until you start measuring it. You need a wearable to understand where your circadian rhythm's sitting.
I'm glad we agree on that, because so many people sort of just don't understand how important sleep is, and just the sleep cycles and when they're going to bed. And you know, people listening out there, Aura's an incredible product, Whoop's incredible product. You don't have to use these. You can use the others. you know, we find, I don't know about you, but the watches of sort of less compliance when it comes to them because people don't like to, and it's difficult to actually get onto the dashboards of these sort of devices. But what's your experience there?
I personally don't like wearing a watch. It's too big. The light goes on. It disturbs my sleep. They're not terribly accurate. The Aura is, I mean, I've been using it for 3 years now. There's nothing that comes close to that. But if there's nothing you can get your hands on, just, you know, go to bed and wake up at the same time of day. That's simple. All you really have to do.
It's simple.
It's simple. You don't have to, like, and if you want to take it a step further, is eat before sunset. It's that simple.
I mean, we talk about how important my data crashes when I'm eating at like 7 at night compared to when I eat at like lunch and then I just don't have anything else. My data, my sleep data is like 10 times better.
Different. And when you see it, and it's backed up with a CGM, like the lights go on, and you can't unknow that. That's a way to really integrate and understand how important this is.
But people are, you know, they're resistant. I mean, some of even my execs and CEOs, no, I'm not going to wear it, I'm not going to do it. They get it and they're like, I can't believe I didn't have this earlier, and it's been so informative, and a lot of our corporate programs, we lose the data. Okay, so you agree. So let's go back to the Re Invent program. I think we've dealt with sort of purpose and just sort of emotional health and the relationship to that's really important. And maybe we even touched on sleep. I think we know how important that is, unless you want to share something else. But yeah, give us sort of the program, where you start and then how you unpack.
Okay, so typically I start off with a very extensive functional medicine-based questionnaire. 10 pages, look at stress, we look at health history, look at different areas of where things are out of sync. And they all relate to each other. So there's sections in the question that deals with liver health, with hormones, with heart health, with breathing, with the fatigue. Fatigue is the biggest issue we're seeing next to weight gain. And so once I've got a good idea of where we're at from that analysis, I do some pretty standard blood tests, but also some quite specific tests. So it's very extensive. So everything from cancer markers through to hormone balance through to inflammatory markers, things that your normal GP won't go and do. C-reactive protein, homocysteine for sure. And that is a really good launching pad to get buy-in. So you come because you want to lose weight or because your doctor sent you, but have you invested emotionally? And between the question and the blood test, there's a lot of emotional buy-in because there's problems with most people. And from there, I create a personalized eating plan, which changes as we go. So I usually see people for 3 months, if not 6 months, and that plan can change 3 or 4, maybe more times during the process.
Brilliant.
Also comes down to if they've got a family, does the eating plan have to sort of dovetail into what's going on in the family? Is it a person who lives alone and cooks for 1 or 2 people? Very important to take that into account. We also need to take into account prep and planning. Most of us don't prep and don't plan because it's a mission. But it's really easy when you get into a system. So it's teaching that. And then, there's all of that to take into account. And then I work with a lot of athletes. So we've got to look at training schedules, training times, recovery times. Most non-professional athletes don't understand that recovery is as important as training. And fueling is as important as recovery.
Absolutely.
So it's very, very specific to an individual. And we measure. So I do a bioimpedance analysis, look at muscle mass, body fat, not so much weight. Weight is irrelevant. We want to correct the composition and the glucose, insulin levels as well. And when all that is coming right, we can adjust the eating around that. And it has to change with time. I don't want people to feel like they're on a diet ever. You've got to be able to go out and eat what you want occasionally, have a glass of wine, know what it's doing to you. My favorite thing is people who come to me initially and say, well, I have a glass of wine every night. You can't take that away. So, I'm not going to take it away. But what I want you to do is have that glass of wine Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And okay, fine, I can live with that. And then they come to me 2 weeks later and go, I can't do this wine anymore. I can now feel what it's doing to me. And we don't know until we stop. We've got no comparison again. You need to know what it feels like to have a good night's sleep, to know that most of the time you're not having good night's sleep. You have to have something to compare it to. So it's not a case of bullying people into you have to do this, you can't do it, unless they're on chemotherapy or they're about to have go into diabetic shock. Then you've got to be a bit more of a hard ass with people. But generally speaking, I want people to figure it out by themselves but I'm going to guide them.
Okay.
And if we're not winning, I'm going to guide them a little more stringently until they get it.
Brilliant.
So some people you push harder, some people you hold back. It really depends on personality type and how invested they are in their bad habits. Yeah. So it's
powerful. Let's talk about macros, and then we can move on to other things, because I've also found recently that people are not having enough protein.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to hear, animal protein versus plant protein. If you want plant protein, that's fine. It's going to be tricky to get it in. Maybe you want to give us sort of your feedback on animal versus plant protein, and then how much protein we need per kg of muscle mass, and what that means with regards to different portions, because just eating a 300 gram steak doesn't give you 300 grams of protein, which people are like under the sort of the misunderstanding of.
Okay, so yes, most of us are eating too little protein. So just to go back to plant versus animal protein, I was vegan for 3 years. I was vegetarian for 4 years. I really believe that was the most unhealthy time of my life.
Okay.
My hormones definitely weren't optimized. I was fatigued all the time. My hair fell out, and I couldn't train. I couldn't function. My brain turned off.
Yeah.
I really believed I was doing the right thing. Not just, and this was years ago, long before it was a fad, long before it was popular. I remember going to a friend's party one night, and I saw a raw piece of steak, and I had an overwhelming urge to just go and eat that meat raw, and I did, and immediately I felt better.
Sure.
And it was the first time I heard my body speaking to me. This is long before I got into nutrition. I realized that I was seriously missing something. So over the years, I've seen many, and I can work with vegetarians. There's lots of ways to get adequate protein from eggs and whey protein if it's made properly. Not all whey. In fact, the majority of whey protein products are rubbish.
Yeah.
They really are.
Okay.
It's got to be done properly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Frankly, it's dangerous because you don't know what's going on in that container.
Yeah.
But vegans, I've seen a lot of vegans, and it's got to the point where I have to be very honest with people and say, I can't work with you anymore if you're vegan, because I can't make a difference in your life. I cannot help you because I've tried. And I used to see a lot of vegan athletes who were just falling apart. And to be very honest, there's no plant-based protein. So from emotion aside, the issue of factory farming and ethics is an issue. That's not what we're talking about. That is something that really needs to change. Obviously, we can't carry on like that. But from a pure metabolic health, brain health, longevity point of view, there's pretty much no way you can survive without animal protein. You can't thrive without animal protein. You can survive because your body will cannibalize itself. You will eat up your own muscles to survive to a point. So there's, if it's got to a point where I cannot actually.
But what about those vegans?
Anymore.
I mean, I think that's good. Listen, I can't help you anymore. And I mean, I think that's really authentic. Because people are going to make their own decisions with regards to who they see. But what about those vegans that I just say to them, look, we've hit a sort of status quo, but you're going to need to increase your supplementation.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that they could? Because I got a lot of vegans that say to me, okay, I want to thrive. I'm an athlete. I run. I do this. And if we supplement them specifically based on their markers, they invariably need to spend more time, more money,
a lot more money.
And then we can get them exactly balanced. Is that a possibility in your practice, or
So
do you hardly see that?
No, we've tried. We've tried with amino acids and B12 and iron.
Yeah.
There gets to a point where your gut can't actually assimilate that anymore. It can't turn it into muscle. It can't turn it into hemoglobin anymore. Initially we see an improvement, and then it starts to switch off. The body recognizes real food as tools for health.
Brilliant.
And even the most expensive, well-made, food-based supplements have a ceiling. In my experience. Maybe something's going to come out on the market next week that we don't know about that's going to solve this problem. I hope it does, because there are people out there suffering because they want to do what's really right for the planet, and I really respect that. But as a practitioner, I can't ethically say I can help you at this stage because we've tried everything and it's not working. We're not seeing a change. We're not seeing an increase in muscle mass and a decrease in body fat. We're not seeing any of these biochemistry markers change for the better. We're just not seeing it. We're not seeing fatigue turn around. We're not seeing better performance. We're just not getting there. And this is a range of athletes and all normal people, from early 20s right through to say 40s, 50s, and it's not working. So I hope one day, I mean, maybe insect protein, maybe, but that's still an animal. It's still sentient. Sure. Well, plants are sentient too, if we really want to dig into the weeds here.
Exactly. Okay, so tell us about the amount, and I think first give it to us based on sort of the research and the data, and I know that's in your book.
Yeah.
But, and then in terms of portion sizes, what someone would sort of need to get the adequate protein.
Yeah. So I got the upper limits of 2 grams per kilo of total body weight, knowing full well that people aren't going to hit the upper limits. Okay. It takes a lot of chewing to hit 2 grams per kilo of total body weight. Not per kilo of lean muscle, but total body weight. So if you're looking at somebody of 100 kilos, that is, 200 grams of protein a day? That works out, if you had to get 200 grams of protein...
Let me change it to 70 kgs, because I think probably... Well, let's take a 50 kg woman. Is that normal? Or 60? Would you say 60?
50 to 60.
Okay.
It's about 25 grams of protein per meal. Okay. 25 to 30 grams of protein in a meal. Okay. And to get that from eggs, you would need 6 eggs in a meal.
Okay. To get 25 grams of protein.
There's about 5 to 6 grams of protein in an egg.
Okay.
So no one's going to eat 6 eggs in a meal. Firstly, you get sick of it in a week. Okay. Sickness can't be very good for you.
Yeah.
So eggs are a superfood, they're really healthy, but 6 eggs are not. Okay. It can't possibly be good for you. So you're looking at about 150 to 200 grams of steak to get your about 30 grams. You're looking at
150 grams of steak, like of rum,
will give you about 25 to 30 grams of protein.
Really? That little?
A lot.
So 150 grams. So the average 300 gram steak at or 200 even, 300 grams steak at a restaurant is going to give you?
Probably around 40 to 45 grams of protein. That's fine for most men.
45 grams protein in one sitting. Okay.
And most of us are not hitting that 25 to 30 per meal. So if you make up for it a little bit more later on, and you're having a little bit less earlier on in the day.
But how do you get it if you're only getting 25 grams per meal? That's 75 grams of protein.
That's 25 grams of protein
per meal. I would say then it's 75 in a day.
Yeah, that's not enough.
Yeah, but that's my point.
That's the problem. That's not the problem.
So then so what's happening there?
That's where we're just not hitting the targets. Okay. And that's why we're seeing obesity. That's why we're seeing cravings. That's why we're seeing people just munching through all kinds of nutrient deficient foods because we're not hitting those targets. It's really hard to hit that target.
Because if I'm 70 kg, well, I'm actually 75, so I need 150 grams. So I need double
per
that.
meal, yeah. So you need.
So I need 50 grams per meal if I wanted to get, and it's difficult to get that absorbed in one meal.
Very, very hard. So that's where good quality whey protein comes in, and by good quality I mean it's not blended with anything else. Yeah. It's grass-fed. There's no hormones. There's no artificial sugars or no artificial sweeteners. Very hard to find a good quality product like that. So whey protein comes from making cheese. It's the water that comes off the milk when you've made cheese. Very high in immunoglobulins, very high in, it's a complete amino acid profile if it hasn't been adulterated. So if it hasn't been heated too much, it's very difficult to find the right thing. That is very bioavailable. Problem is, for some people, it also spikes insulin. Okay. So you've got to be quite careful also with, you don't want an isolate, you want a concentrate. Concentrate absorbs slower, you don't get an insulin response.
Okay. So what are some of your favorite brands?
Muscle Tech, been around forever.
Okay.
But their grass-fed whey, which sadly, if anyone from Muscle Tech's listening to this, please bring it back on the market. Okay. It was the cleanest protein that doesn't cause any gastric distress. There are Gold Standard is good. They've also been around for 20, 30 years. Okay. Most of what you see locally has been blended with concentrate soy because whey is expensive. So to make it worthwhile, they have to, or make it cost effective for the average person to afford, they have to blend it with something. Okay. And this is where we see bloating and gastric distress and all sorts of problems. And then everyone thinks that whey is a problem. Whey is probably making up 10% of that ingredient. There's so much else in there that's causing trouble. Okay. Yeah.
And what about amino acids and that? Do you do essential amino acids? Is that an option instead of whey?
It is. Okay. Very much. So if you can't tolerate whey, and some people really can't, no matter how hard they try, they have not an allergy, but more they break out an eczema. It comes down to gut health. So if the gut is really in distress, for some people whey is a problem. For other people it's very healing, but it depends on the level of what kind of dysbiosis we're looking at. So amino acids work really well. Again, who makes them? Creatine, fantastic for healing the gut, for healing the brain. It also helps the body absorb your aminos. So if you blend your aminos with a good quality clean creatine, about 5 grams a day, your absorption is that much better. So it helps the mucosal barrier in the gut become more efficient. So great, good old bodybuilding stuff, that's been going around for 20, 30 years. It still holds true.
Okay. My comment on BCAs, branched chain amino acids, not really great, and I'd rather go essential amino acids or whey.
Yeah.
What do you think about the difference between whey protein and using essential amino acids? Do you have a preference, or is it just a price point or accessibility point?
I think it's personal preference. So you do not branched chain because it's limited. You do essential aminos. So all of your essentials and whey or whey. So if you can't if you can't tolerate whey or you just don't want it or can't find what you need, then essential amino acids really do hit the mark.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people out there that say it's not good enough. It's good enough.
Okay.
At least you're getting those aminos in. But you'll know when you start testing body composition. You'll see if it's working.
You got me onto that scale. Is that the scale that you're using?
Yes.
It's pretty precise in terms of making the same error. Maybe it's not the most accurate.
Same error margin.
Yeah, which I think is important for people to understand.
It's a trend. We're looking for trends.
Yes.
And from the perspective of looking for a trend, it's working.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about DEXA in South Africa in terms of body composition? Are they around?
Yes. So there are DEXA machines. They use them for bone density.
Okay.
Medical aid will pay only if you're over 50.
Okay.
But you've got to set up that DEXA to look at body fat, not bones.
Okay.
So there's a specific setting. You'll find it in all hospitals, but no one uses it to measure body fat, and that is the gold standard. For
How
body
much
fat
are
measurement.
those? Do you know? So someone listening
4
up
million
there.
rands, maybe?
No, say if you want to go for one of those scans and you don't have medical aid and you want to actually go and do it.
It's not terribly expensive.
Okay.
A couple of $100. But you've got to go somewhere where they know how to look at body fat.
But who knows how to look at body fat?
That I don't know. So if anyone, again, is listening who does that, please let us know.
Because this is really important, in America they talk on the podcast, and a lot of the heroes that I listen to and probably you listen to all talk about DEXA.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the only way to see with your eyes exactly where you're holding fat. And do it once or twice a year.
Yeah.
That's all you need. That with your blood tests once or twice a year. You don't need to do it more.
Yeah.
You don't need to get on the scale every day. Heaven forbid, every day. It's not going to give you anything accurate. In fact, for women specifically, you should be only getting on the scale on day 1 of your cycle. Just keep it to day 1 and keep that's once a month. Most women can't do that. They have to weigh every day, which makes you crazy.
Yeah.
Because water, all sorts of things fluctuate daily. So men and women, very different protocols, very different eating plans, very different exercise styles. Yeah, we're very
But let's
different.
go back to protein because that's important. So someone like me, I need to get 150 grams of net protein in. So
especially since you are so active.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm training so hard on that. And I'm only getting 50 grams. So is it like a sixth of, because it's of a 300 gram steak, I'm getting only 50 grams.
Probably.
50 grams.
Yeah.
And I need to get to 150.
Yes.
So then how much is a chicken breast?
Chicken breast will give you about 20 grams.
20 grams. I
So
need two 20. So that's 40 grams.
2 big chicken
That's only
breasts.
90 grams.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I've got to eat
That's
the
it.
eggs to get the 60 grams that I'm going to eat in. But that's like very difficult because you said about 6 grams.
So you do 2 eggs and make that up with, say, smoked salmon or cottage cheese or whatever.
How much protein is cottage cheese?
That whole tub will only give you 25 grams of protein.
I don't do dairy easily. It doesn't do well with me.
Most people don't. And to eat a whole tub of cottage cheese in one meal is a big ask.
Yeah.
So that's where your whey comes in. Really.
What about anchovies and what about mackerel? How much protein is in that?
Okay, so your mackerel, most fish, you're going to get 20 grams of protein per, I'd say about 75 to 100 grams. So it's very high in protein, or more than adequate in protein, but also high in fat.
You say?
Yeah, 25 grams of protein per 100 grams of whichever fish you're looking at.
Okay.
So
is that across anchovies and sardines and
salmon, tuna, pretty much, give or take a few grams.
Okay.
So because your fat content is also making up quite a big proportion of that fish. So your fat content in mackerel and salmon is going to be a little bit higher. Tuna a little bit lower, so your protein content is going to be higher per 100 grams. But fish is really good. Yeah, also, people ask about mercury. You'll find that in your bigger fish. So the small pole caught fish is pretty much healthier. In Africa, fish is really expensive, so we just don't eat enough of it. But hake.
Tuna, I'm not a big fan.
No.
In those cans, I don't think it's healthy.
It's not. It's the cans that are more of a worry than the mercury.
Yeah.
But you can get it in glass bottles, and then it costs a fortune.
Yes.
So what do you do?
Yeah. Okay, so fish is limited. You're saying only 25 grams per 100 grams, and then but then you get all the good oils in there. You get EPA, DHA. So there are those new ones now that you can find, anchovies, sardines, in olive oil, so that you don't get the seed oils, the omega-6s.
Got to be careful of the seed oil.
Yeah.
In fact, stay away from seed oil.
Yes.
I mean, olive oil is really all we should be eating, frankly,
Okay.
and fish oil. Yeah.
Not the seeds, not this. They put it in sunflower oil, causes insulin resistance at high levels. We see those ratios that are totally out when we do the testing.
Yeah.
Okay, so fish is an option, but then you're still going back to whey or essential amino acids. And then do you do checks on to see if, what happens to kidney function or uric acid with people taking so much protein?
Okay, so do uric acid, full kidney function, creatinine, everything initially, and every 6 weeks.
Okay.
Nothing happens to these markers ever.
Yeah.
If somebody has renal problems, you're definitely going to moderate, and you're going to just test more often. So I'd probably go up to about 1.5 grams per kilo of total body weight.
Okay.
Obviously, as you lose weight, it comes down. But you've got to just be more rigorous with the testing and just keep an eye on the kidneys.
I've also seen the same.
Nothing.
I haven't seen much change over there. I think if people have got kidney dysfunction initially, it'll be careful. But then those people have problems with protein, they have problems with their muscles. So if you're listening out there or you're listening or watching on YouTube, kidney function is crucially important. Yeah. Because when you can't assimilate protein, things start
failing.
Yeah.
But they also can't assimilate potassium, and there's potassium in everything. So you've got the choices are so limited. It's a very scary situation. Okay. But then I only work with you've got to work with a doctor. So they've got to be with a nephrologist. You've got to work very closely with a doctor. Can't take chances.
What about combining, because I've started with my clients and my patients doing a lot more strength work with the higher protein, kept them satiated. They've really done well. They've dropped their body fat. But it seems like a lot of women and men out there, not all men, but they think I can just do cardio, I can just do the walking. How important is the strength training? I'm lifting weights. Not doing burpees,
You've got to pick up heavy things. Yeah. So, the evidence is just becoming, we've always known this, but the evidence is becoming more and more available. So from an aging well point of view, if you want to age strong, and you don't want to be dependent on a walker or wear nappies. When you get into your 80s, you have to pick up heavy things. You have to do work, because if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Muscle mass is youth, and people die of sarcopenia. This is where it all goes wrong. This is where bones get broken. When you don't have the strength to stand up anymore, you fall over, you'll break something. So, muscle mass is associated with a reduction in osteoporosis. It's associated with insulin stability, which is associated with, bringing down your chances of getting Alzheimer's and any kind of dementia. We know that dementia is type 3 diabetes, and when you've got an endocrine organ being your muscle that is using glucose efficiently, you're going to simply age well. That's what it comes down to. You're not going to look like Schwarzenegger. He spent most of his life in the gym, and he was eating 2 chickens a day, as well as everything else, and 12 eggs, and taking steroids. And if you haven't seen his documentary, you need to see this. It's fascinating. Okay. But people do have a perception that when they get into the gym, they're going to look strange, and you're not. Especially women, and there's still this perception. If you want to age well and look wonderful and have good skin and be able to do what you want in life as you age, you have to pick up heavy things 6 days a week.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's not to say cardio doesn't count, it really does, because your brain needs high intensity cardio, it needs low intensity, long duration cardio. There's benefits to everything, but you cannot not train with weights. It's first aid.
Brilliant. Totally agree with you. Okay, so let's go back to the plant protein, because that's another story now. Someone's looking at the day, because I know I'm going to get these questions and I know
Yeah.
people are going to come back to me, is what options do they have to get this 2 grams per body weight?
So there's soy and pea protein out there.
Mm.
Again, highly processed. We don't know what goes on in the manufacturing process of these, products. For me, the only vegetable protein that seems to work is edamame beans, which is green soybeans. I don't know whether or not soy concentrates affect hormones or not. It's hard to say because I haven't seen enough hard data in my own practice to say, well, somebody's having X amount of soy and we're seeing estrogen increase. We see that anyway. We see that with a normal, bad, unhealthy lifestyle, we see estrogen issues. So I don't know. I would be very nervous of putting somebody on too much soy, mostly because it's overprocessed. Same with pea protein. I stand to be corrected, but I don't know any pea protein that isn't sprayed to bits with glyphosate.
Okay.
Somebody can say, well, we can verifiably send you tests and say, well, this pea protein doesn't have traces of pesticide in it. Fantastic. But then again, we've got to say, where's your body fat? Where's your muscle mass? Let's take the right amount of pea and soy protein for 3-4 months and keep testing and see if it's making a difference. If it is making a difference, fabulous. Most of the time it doesn't. So, like I said, I don't know. I don't know where we can get vegan protein. I wish we could. It would solve problems for many people. I don't know if amino acids are synthesized artificially either, or if they come from an animal-derived product to begin with. I would assume they would come from an animal-derived product, but I don't know.
Yeah,
So it is an issue. Yes, there is a market for that. The problem with vegan, the trend, not doing it right, is that we are eating, again, way too many. If you want to be vegan, most people who are just eating highly processed foods all over again. They're just trading one polony for another. And I'd rather eat the pig polony because at least I know where it came from.
Yeah.
You kind of know heme protein we don't know how dangerous that is. It's reported to boost estrogen by 80% or something ridiculous. So you don't want to put something into your body that's going to mess your hormones around.
Yeah.
It's too scary. So no, I don't know yet. But if I do, I'll let you know.
Please. We got to work on the DEXA together. I think that's very important. I think for both our patients and clients, and then look at another option for vegans. Because at the end of the day,
I still want to help people.
You want to help people, but then I really just want to respect. Just saying to someone, can't help you. We got to have that sort of honesty, authenticity, and respect. For one another. Okay, good. So let's talk about macros. What percentage of the diet do you think should be that protein for most? And I know there's sort of no exact formula.
Yeah.
But sort of tell us, because now we're going to be looking at, and I don't even like the word carbs to a large degree, because they really are like healthy if they're done correctly.
If it's
Same
real
with
food.
protein, if it's real food. But what macro sort of percentages are you looking at for most?
30, if we're looking at percentages.
Okay.
If those foods come from clean sources.
Okay.
So carbs, yes, plant-based carbs.
Yes.
Vegetables and fruit.
Okay.
Fruit is sugar. So if you have a good body fat percentage, you can eat fruit. But if you are battling with weight, fruit is the same as eating chocolate.
Yeah.
Honey as well.
Yeah.
So it might have health properties, but if you've got a CGM and you go and eat an apple and your blood sugar goes to 10, it's not for you, not now.
Yeah.
When you take that apple and you combine it with a couple of eggs and perhaps some nut butter, not sugar added, you will see that glucose come down to about 6. It won't spike to 10. So it's combining those macros that can keep things in control. That's important, is to not separate foods out.
Exactly, and maybe having the fruit after dinner, so you can
Yes.
see. There was a big sort of thing that I've done with a lot of my clients
Works
and
like a charm.
patients. Yeah, because you see on the CGM, they say, hang on, I'm having fruit, I'm enjoying it, but it's actually not spiking up my glucose.
So
A lot of people are having all these fruit juices on an empty stomach and fruit on an empty stomach, and they're really struggling with their insulin and glucose, which is, I think, causing issues.
It's causing issues. I mean, fruit is designed by nature to make animals fat so that they survive winter.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for, so they can spread the seeds but survive through winter when there's nothing. And if we eat too much fruit, we also can survive through winter on nothing, but we don't, because there's always an abundance of food around. So that's a big misconception. Yeah, fruit's great for kids who are very active, much better than energy aids and all that junk. But I think, the easiest way to think about it is when you're looking at your plates, have twice the amount of protein you think you need, have half the amount of carbs you think you need, and don't leave out the fat. And by fat, I mean oily fish and olive oil or olives. Okay. Real food, not processed fats, so not seed oils. And if we use that as a guideline, so the easiest way to think about it is if you're having chicken and rice, just as an example, half the rice, double the chicken, add your veggies, and then drizzle some fat over that. So that's like an illustration you can just keep in mind. So if you're going to a friend's braai, double the meat, half the potato salad, go big on the greens, and put olive oil on everything. You'll never get hungry. You won't look for dessert if you do it that way. And you'll be participating. You won't be the person who's not eating something because you're trying to lose weight. You'll be eating, you'll be losing weight, you'll be satisfied. Everything works.
What about all these sauces? I was at the Standard Bank Golf Day yesterday, and then they had a nice curry, and we had curry. I don't have much rice, I don't like it, but then they have this curry, you're not sure what's inside it. I mean, now when you're eating out, how do these macros work? I mean,
it's very hard. So you've got to be very, look, it is possible, but when you're going, a curry, you've got no control. You don't know what's going on in there. Usually there's lots of seed oil. The Indian population, many of my clients, in fact, more than half of my clients are Indian, and we know that the Indian population has more diabetes than anyone else. Because of the volume of starch they consume. So it's rice with everything, potatoes with everything, roti with everything. It's just very dense in carbohydrates. So as a rule, I really believe that this is a once-off, you go out, you enjoy yourself, you have the curry, you don't worry about what's in there. But for the majority of the time, if you've got some kind of control over what you're doing, and you can pick and choose where you eat out, you can always order the fish and the steak and the sweet potato and the broccoli or the salad. You can control for it. But there's going to be times when you can't, and that's where you've got to go, fine.
Okay, cool.
Just go with it.
How do people measure their fats? Because you said 30, 30, 30. How do people sort of look at that and plan for that?
All right, so purely from a calorie point of view, and I really don't like using calories because that's just a number that makes dietitians' lives easier. So when we look at calories, you've got 4 calories per gram in a source of protein, 4 calories per gram in a source of carbohydrate, 9 calories per gram in your fats. So as a rule, this is where there's so many macro calculators out there. If you just type into Google 30% macro calculator, you will get per tablespoon how much fat you will need. So for most people, for yourself, for example, if you were looking at specifically going 30% fat, that would look like 3 tablespoons of olive oil per meal. It's quite a lot. Okay. So again, if it's good quality fats, go a little bit bigger than you think. You'll eat less in the end. Fats are satiating, especially if they're good quality.
Okay, brilliant. I see in your book here, which is incredible, you got some meal plans that include fasting. Possibly give us your view on fasting, and then how you incorporate that into your clients' sort of eating plans, and whether you do a lot of it, what your view is, because it seems to be the rage.
Such a rage, and it's so misunderstood. So fasting doesn't work for everyone. Like everything doesn't work for everyone. I find fasting works better for men for some reason than it does for women. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone, and it is a survival hormone. It's there to make sure we can nurture babies. Okay? If a woman who has moderate to high estrogen levels decides to fast, it's going to backlash, especially at certain times of the month. That estrogen is going to make it much harder. It's going to turn down metabolic processes, because that hormone is responsible for making sure we have body fat so we can feed the next generation. Men don't have that problem. Okay, it's a real thing, and I actually spoke to Noakes about that in a podcast with him about a year or so ago, and he said they're seeing it as well, that the keto program, his banting program doesn't work as well for some women sometimes. So what we found is fasting works better for women post-menopause when estrogen has done its thing. It definitely works better for men. There are certain times of the month where it works okay for women. That all said and done, fasting is not starving. fasting should include the period of time that we're sleeping. So we're sleeping for hopefully 8 hours. That should take up half of your fasting time. So fasting for me, when somebody says to me they want to fast, or I think that their gut health would benefit from fasting, that's why I really enjoy a fasting protocol, is because it gives your digestive system a chance to calm down and eliminate and assimilate. So that's where fasting really benefits us, is to have breakfast a little later and to eat before sunset. And that's the only fasting you need to do. So if you're eating in a 6 to 8 hour window, and for the rest of the time you're not, that's pretty much your best strategy, whether you're male or female. That said, if you're really active, that might need to be moderated. That said, if you're a student or a child, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure your kids are, eating as soon as they're able to when they wake up in the morning, because their brains need to be full of glycogen to focus.
Unless they're extremely obese,
of
or
course.
they've got glucose issues. And
then that's a whole other story of itself. But then we change the macros, what they're eating. So we don't do any carbs in the morning. We go high in the fats and proteins. Even as much as doing sort of a keto coffee with some children, teenagers, works really, really well. And gets them satiated and keeps them awake up until 11 o'clock in the morning, when they'd usually keel over because they'd had cereal for breakfast. So there's, again, the strategy is different for everybody, but fasting is valuable from a gut health point of view. It's with a weight loss, from the weight loss point of view, the earlier on in the day you can stop eating, definitely works.
No, absolutely.
With everybody almost.
Tell me this whole con of cereals. I mean, it's just so frustrating. I mean, someone's listening out there. I think that's probably been the biggest lie that's Big Food has sold, that you need cereal in the morning. I mean, it's just so highly processed, and what it does to your biochemistry. So give us your view on that.
It's cake. It's like eating cake for breakfast, like a muffin. It's eating sugar. You may as well take the sugar bowl and just put sugar in your mouth. So cereal was, way back in the I think it was the 1950s, the U.S. Agricultural Society put a lot of money into marketing why people should be buying wheat and corn and soy products, because it was making up the biggest commodity in the U.S. sort of market. They had to sell more of this stuff. So they said that eggs and bacon, which people have been eating for centuries without heart disease or diabetes, was the problem. And we should be eating high-fiber bran or cornflakes or any of these sugary cereals with a glass of orange juice, which is going to throw up your triglycerides, and that's going to give you heart disease. I mean, that's measurable in everybody. And it became, we got hypnotized. That and margarine. We got hypnotized into believing that this was good for you because it was marketed that way. Until somebody said, but the emperor's not wearing any clothes. Before cereals came along, we didn't have diabetes, cancer, dementia, heart disease, hypertension. But nobody wanted to know that because, doctors and governments were so invested, and you couldn't say, sorry, I can't, it's not true. And it's carried on. I mean, we've been led to believe that fiber is important for health, to prevent cancer. Yes, it is. Not to the extent that we've been told, though. I mean, high-fiber bran is not going to prevent cancer. And it's really not what most people should be eating. I mean, diversity of plant foods is probably going to stand you in better stead in the long term. Not density of fiber, not 25 grams of fiber a day. You're going to be chewing carrots all day long. And you're going to end up with IBS if you try and do that, if you hit those targets. And I'm going to name names because I really don't care. I mean, Weet-Bix, Special K, all these things that people, or bran flakes, that religiously eat because they think they have to go to the toilet. At least you do have to go to the toilet twice a day. Your stomach has to work. But it's not going to happen with bran flakes and psyllium husk. Sorry. And you only have to really learn the hard way sometimes.
It's important. I think we've got to, really hold a line and be, truthful and speak our minds.
Absolutely.
And otherwise I think people don't get any other narrative other than the Big Food narrative that's out there. Okay, so we've covered fasting. Let's talk maybe as we come to the end of our show. It's sort of blown by, but really any sort of type of biohacks other than CGM. Maybe we do another podcast on sort of the technology side of that and that. But anything else that you use from a biohacking perspective, like cold plungers and trying to increase brown fat, or infrared sauna, or I don't know, anything that you think about that's important, peptides, those type of areas.
Yeah, so definitely cold therapy.
Yeah.
And again, the research is just coming thick and fast. You know, what we thought was useful about getting into a cold pool, or how long you've got to do it, the research is still there. But the benefit of cold exposure, even if it's 30 seconds in a cold shower, you will feel the benefit. I don't know from a fat metabolism point of view. I guess people who will go and do a cold shower are probably doing everything else right as well. So it's not just one thing that's going to work. Infrared for sure. I mean, from detoxification, that's critically important. Ozone therapy for sure, but in conjunction with maybe cold therapy and infrared. Nothing happens you also can't neglect your sleep. Drink a half a bottle of wine a night and think you can go sit in an ozone machine. You've got to do everything right, but they all count. But for me, sleeping. It gets more and more obvious as we go along that, I was shocked to listen to a doctor tell my dad that because he's old, he will sleep less as a default. It's like, you're old because you're sleeping less.
That's true.
I don't care what age you are, you've got to get that 8 hours. And if it means going to bed at 7 and waking up at 5 because you're tuned into the sunrise, sunset, so be it. Find another time to watch your series. But if you want to age well, you've got to really nail that sleep. And it's hard to do because socially, psychologically, we are so out of touch with that.
It's true.
I don't care. I'm in bed by 7:30 every night.
Wow.
It's non-negotiable. And my child is as well. And long may that last. And it really pays off. I mean, the amount of energy you have through the day, how you can sustain focus, won't happen. And your moods won't stabilize unless you get that sleep. I mean, we make sure our toddlers sleep. Why do we stop doing that? We should all be eating every couple of hours, within reason, and getting that sleep. That's the most important thing.
Great, thank you so much. Just tell us where people can find you, your links. We'll put them in the show notes as well, but where people can connect with you.
All right, so Instagram, Re Invent Health, Facebook, Re Invent Health. My website is reinventhealth.co.za. Just have to type in my name and it comes up everywhere, thank goodness.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant, and it's a great book. I really recommend that people get through it. I've gone through, we never got through the recipes, but there's a whole bunch of recipes, meal plans, anti-inflammatory meal plans, glucose stabilizing meal plans. I mean, it's really, really powerful. And the food is yummy, yummy. My wife loves to cook the food, so go for it. And I think you've done incredible work here, and wish you all the best, and just declare favor and blessing over you, because I think you speak truths and from the heart, and you've got an incredible backstory. So thanks, Nix.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's a real blessing to be here.
Cool.